Nile River played an important role in shaping the lives and society of ancient Egypt. The Nile provided the ancient Egyptians with food, transportation, building materials, and more. The Nile River is the longest river in the world. It is over 4,100 miles long. The Nile is located in northeast Africa and flows through many different African countries, including Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Burundi. There are two major tributaries that feed the Nile, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The Nile River flows north through Egypt and into the Mediterranean Sea. Ancient Egypt was divided into two regions, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. This looks a bit confusing on a map because Upper Egypt is to the south and Lower Egypt is to the north. This is because the names come from the flow of the Nile River. The most important thing the Nile provided to the ancient Egyptians was fertile land. Most of Egypt is a desert, but along the Nile River, the soil is rich and good for growing crops. The three most important crops were wheat, flax, and papyrus. Wheat was the main staple food of the Egyptians. They used it to make bread. They also sold a lot of their wheat throughout the Middle East, helping the Egyptians to become rich. Flax was used to make linen cloth for clothing. This was the main type of cloth used by the Egyptians. And papyrus was a plant that grew along the shores of the Nile. The ancient Egyptians found many uses for this plant, including paper, baskets, rope, and sandals. Around September of each year, the Nile would overflow its banks and flood the surrounding area. This sounds bad at first, but it was one of the most important events in the life of the ancient Egyptians. The flood brought rich black soil and renewed the farmlands. The Nile River also provided a lot of building materials for the ancient Egyptians. They used the mud from the riverbanks to make sun-dried bricks. These bricks were used in building homes, walls, and other buildings. The Egyptians also acquired limestone and sandstone from the hills along the side of the Nile. Since most of the major cities of ancient Egypt were built along the Nile River, the river could be used like a major highway throughout the empire. Boats constantly traveled up and down the Nile carrying people and goods. Akhet was considered the first season and was the time of the flooding of the Nile. The other two seasons were Peret, the growing season, and Shamu, the harvest season. So just quick fun facts about the Nile River. The ancient Egyptians called the rich black soil from the floods the gift of the Nile. Today, the Aswan Dam keeps the Nile from flooding modern cities. The ancient Egyptians also called the Nile Ewur, which means black and comes from the black soil. The Egyptians measured the height of the annual flood using a Nile meter. This helped them to determine how good the crops would be that year. The cause of the flood each year was heavy rains and melting snow to the south near the source of the Nile. The ancient Egyptians believed that the flood was caused by the tears of the goddess Isis as she cried for her dead husband Osiris. Well, anyways, guys, so that was the end of my video. Comment down in the section what you guys learned from this. What do you guys like about the ancient Egyptian history, about the Nile history? So so that was just my intake on the Egyptians and like their contributions to the Nile River. You guys have anything else to add to the topic? Yes, you can always comment down below or like the video, and as well subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much. Bye.